So, most people, they think about me and they think about the work we're doing and they think about cancer and as the topic that we work the most. Well, in reality is we work with a lot of cancer, but boy, we also work with a lot of chronic pain. In particular, a lot of people are suffering out there with really severe and debilitating back and neck pain. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the causes and some of the reasons for that and what we can do to help them or help you. And so the first thing I want to tell you is about why is back pain an issue that I would be spending some time concentrating. First, I'm going to tell you that I grew up with a mother who had pretty severe arthritis. And I remember thinking, Mom, why can't you get down on the floor and play with me like my friends' moms? Why do you always just sit there? And why are you always taking all those pills? Why are you always, going and taking a nap? And what's going on, Mom? And this was my childhood, was witnessing this. Unfortunately, I have some of the same genetic conditions my mother did. So I have been suffering with pain in my back and injuries in my back for about 30 years now. And so I know firsthand some of the horror stories of conventional medicines versus using this beautiful plant cannabis. In addition to that, my husband had broken his back, and he is a sober alcoholic. And when it came time to have surgery, because they said you're going to have surgery or you're going to end up in a wheelchair, he said, I'm not going to do that. There's no way I'm going to give up my sobriety and go on these life-sucking opioids, which they were telling him were his only option. Side note right there, I have to say, isn't it a shame that while cannabis was legally allowed, nobody bothered, no medical professional ended up bothering to mention it as an option for him? But we did fortunately have the opportunity to have investigated on our own. We had somebody who was very, very kind who said, hey, I make brownies for my boyfriend. Well, we weren't really to make brownies, but we started looking at, well, maybe this is an opportunity and a solution. And the more we looked at it and the more we started investigating, the more we understood the validity and the hope that comes with using cannabis to manage this debilitating disease. So the first thing I want to show you here is, we all recognize that, grabbing the neck and grabbing the lower back in pain. And I want to tell you that 80% of all Americans will experience back pain. Either you have it now or you will have it, unfortunately, at some point. The number is reduced to about 10% around the world, and I think it'll be clear why in a minute, but I'll comment more about that. It's the most prevalent type of pain. More people seek help from a medical professional for back pain than for any other reason. It's also between 7 and 10% of those people will develop chronic back pain. There's a difference between acute pain and chronic. When you're talking about chronic pain, you're talking about nothing. The disease is the pain. Pain is something that we experience as a signal to let us know that something is going wrong in the body. And so that's why a person who doesn't have a pain response is in so much danger of being seriously hurt. You put your hand on a hot stove, if you don't feel pain, you don't know to grab your hand back off of it. But chronic pain is different. Chronic pain is where the pain itself becomes the disease. There's so much inflammation and memory in the nerves of what's going on that no matter what you do, you have pain. And only a small percentage of these are helped by traditional pharmaceuticals and over-the-counter solutions. You have people that are using, a myriad of different alternatives. You have people that are using NSAIDs like Aleve, or those are non-steroidal solutions like Tylenol, ibuprofen, etc. You have people using opioids, everything from OxyContin, Vicodin, Norco, these sorts of things. You have muscle relaxers that people take, like Soma and Flexeril, and all of these have all their horrible side effects of constipation, mood change, all sorts of things that are not very positive. As a side note here, when people talk about cannabis and the psychoactivity associated with it, I'm like, is it because you feel good that's the problem? Because all these opioids that people are taking certainly have psychoactivity. It's just that it's more depressing psychoactivity. It's not a pleasant experience. So the reason that Americans have the 80% and the rest of the world 10% is because desk work is the leading cause of back pain. We have our kids sitting at their Game Boys and sitting and hunched over at their computers, and then they go to jobs where we're all hunched over at our computers at our desks. We've become a Dilbert world. And one of the side effects of that is this severe, chronic, ongoing nerve pain that we have in our backs. Besides the fact that from an evolutionary standpoint, we are not really that evolved to be bipedal, we're certainly not meant to be sitting on our tailbones all day with our arms hunched forward at a laptop. So that's something to be aware of. So if you have an opportunity, you might want to stand up at your desk, raise it, move around while you're doing your work to see if you can limit some of the pain you're experiencing. Women experience 8% more chronic back pain than men do. Interesting though, over 50% more men miss work for their back pain than women. So even though we have more back pain, we just kind of, go right through it. Anyone who's given birth will understand we can put up with a lot of pain. But anyway, more men are missing work. And if you think about the impact on our economy, it's just phenomenal. $50 billion each year is in direct costs associated with back pain, and over $100 billion is spent on other ancillary situations because of back pain. That is a huge economic impact. So you have people that are not only missing work, then they're going on disability, then they're not productive, then they go into depression, and then they have their diets that go to pot, and then you have all sorts of other problems that develop as a result of it. Most people, given a choice, would rather go to work than be home in pain on disability. Don't think for a minute just because your neighbor, lucky guy, doesn't have to go to work. Anyone who's experienced back pain knows there's no such thing as lucky and back pain in the same sentence. So I want to say the thing about chronic pain, unlike acute pain, as I said before, it serves no protective biological function. It's not like you have chronic back pain and it's going to protect you from anything. If anything, it's going to self-perpetuate, because as you are suffering with this pain, you become less active, and with less activity, your muscles break down, your support skeletal breaks down, and then you're not supporting these inflamed and these damaged nerves the same way that you would if you were actually getting out and walking. Well, the last thing you feel like doing when you're in a lot of pain and you're on opioids, which make you kind of sleepy and goofy anyway, is to get up and go for a walk. We also, as a side thing, on the way that our disability is set up, people are discouraged from getting well, because if they do things to feel better, they get called out and they get their money stopped, and then so they have to perpetuate a system of being sick in order to continue having a roof over their head and foods on their table, which means that they're not doing the things to increase their productivity and get back to work in a healed manner. So I want to talk to you for a minute about how chronic pain works. What is happening when you have chronic nerve pain, and how do the cannabinoids, in particular I'm going to focus right at this moment on THC and CBD. What do they actually do, and how do they work within your body to help you to understand what's happening, so that you can understand this is a biological effect. This is actually something that's happening. It's not masking the pain, it's actually changing what's happening in a physiology within your body. There's 5 mechanisms involved with the pain reduction with CB1 and CB2 activation by THC. The CB1 and CB2, what those refer to are the cannabinoid receptors that exist on the surface of the cells that are activated by cannabinoids. A cannabinoid in this case would be THC and CBD. You have your endogenous cannabinoids within your body, which are anandamide 2-AG, which do this, but they don't do it enough when people are experiencing this chronic pain, and that's why you need to take an exogenous or a phyto or plant-based cannabinoids in the form of a cannabis plant in one form or another. But what's happening is the THC will retard the electrochemical reaction at the peripheral pain receptor. Don't worry about it if the terms seem a little bit complex. I'll go into and show you an illustration of what I'm talking about in just a minute. So THC also interrupts the pain signal at the dorsal root ganglion. It interrupts the pain signal at the neuron. And an activation of the CB2, which are the receptors that are more prevalent in your immune system and in your peripheral organs, whereas the CB1 are in your central nervous system, which obviously with chronic pain, both of those are very important. The immune response triggers inflammation, which anyone who knows anything about pain knows that inflammation is an enormous problem when you're in severe pain. Then the last thing is the psychoactive euphoric effects of THC can help you have a break from the pain, and it interrupts the short-term memory, which normally is not a good thing. But when you are having a lot of pain, interrupting the short-term memory will mitigate the stress response and give you a respite from this experience of the constant ongoing pain. Now, CBD, what it does, cannabidiol, is such a powerful anti-inflammatory that it's between 30 and 50 times more powerful than your standard hydrocortisone. So it gives tremendous relief with the same way that a steroid and even more powerfully, but you don't end up with the bonus of a shut down adrenal system, because cannabis does not shut down your adrenal system. So the way that a steroid, anyone who's ever been on a steroid knows how difficult it is to get off of it. And that's because your adrenals stop working on their own. Well, if you could use CBD instead of a steroid, you're going to be doing a much more friendly thing for your body. The US government, in fact, had a patent on CBD as a neuroprotectant, because this same drug that they say has no medical value, they thought was worth patenting so that they could exploit its phenomenal medical benefits. So I'm going to take you through right here, and I want to show you on this slide what you're looking at is, I know it looks kind of like, what the heck is that? But it's the presynaptic and postsynaptic neuron. And if you remember back from your biology, your chemistry classes, you'll see that you have where the signal gets transferred down from the pre to the post, and that netherland in between. And what happens is the neurotransmitters will send the signal that you're in pain. What cannabis does is when you activate the CB1 receptors, it actually blocks the neurotransmission from sending the actual pain signal. So it's not that you're blocking a pain that's happening. The pain actually does not occur because it does not send the signal to your brain. And on the CB2 receptor side of things, what's so amazing is that controls the pain response by blocking the inflammation. So you're actually making a difference in the physiology within the body by helping to decrease the inflammation around the nerves, which cause so much pain, and then also stopping the translation of the neurotransmission of the actual pain signal itself. So I'm going to show you here, if you see in that little purple area, there's like a dotted line box that you're looking at right above where it says spinal cord. I'm going to take you back to show you that is this. That is that neurotransmitter that's going on, the transmission between the post and presynaptic neurons. So what happens is all of your epithelial cells, and your neurons, they all have these nerve endings, and anything that has a nerve ending can have a pain response associated with it. So you have a pain situation at some point in your body, whether it's your knee or your back or your skin, anywhere where you have, or an organ, anywhere where you have a pain response. You have this process that it goes through, where it goes to the dorsal root ganglia. If you recall, I talked about that just a few minutes ago. And when it goes, and what it does is it then sends a signal up the spinal cord to the brain stem, to the base of your spine, or the top of your spine, where where pain is actually perceived in the brain. Okay. At the same time, you have these CB1 receptors that are expressing themselves around anywhere they're needed on the surface of the cells, and when you activate them, they stop. You can see that they stop the transmission of the signal at the actual nerves themselves. They do it again at the dorsal root ganglia at the base of your spine, and they block it even a third time up at the pain perception area in your brain. Fascinating stuff. And then you have the microglia, where you have where it actually, the CB2, which is on the cells, actually impacts the inflammation, where you have reduced inflammation by targeting this part of it. So now this is all the way that it technically works within your body to get you out of pain. But in addition, as I said before, you also have the euphoria, which is the mood control areas, and then the short-term reduction of your memory, which is the memory control area. So by having those areas of the brain being stimulated, the CB1s being activated, you're able to have a complete pain response that is positive and not intended to just mask while the pain is happening underneath. It's actually eliminating and reducing the amount of pain that you're actually experiencing. Okay, so this is right here. What I want to show you is, since I believe this is like 2013, so it's already a little bit older, but they took the Medicare, which of course is the closest that we have to socialized, wonderful healthcare in this country. They do a really good job of tracking expenses and costs that they have on pharmaceuticals, because obviously Americans are the largest consumers of prescription medications of any country in the world. And especially when you have back pain, the number of medicines that people will have lined up on their counters is truly, truly astonishing. So what they found is that in states where it was legal in 2013, you had 1,826 less daily prescribed opiates per doctor, okay? So that's how many less prescriptions for daily dose that a physician was able to write because these people were able to use cannabis. Secondary, anybody who's ever experienced chronic pain will tell you sleep is an enormous issue. It is very, very difficult to sleep when you're in pain. And so people are exhausted, which of course just makes their pain that much worse. And they're able, here the reduction is 362 less daily doses being prescribed for sleeping aids where they have cannabis. And then the third is depression. I mean, pain is depressing. Pain can really depress you. And I mean, in a way that anybody who has not experienced it doesn't know. It's like life doesn't have meaning, doesn't have purpose. You don't feel like everything you've been trained to do, you can't do it anymore. Now what do I do with my life? Especially when it sadly hits us when we're young. In this case, 265 less doses are prescribed per doctor for daily use for depression. These are very, very important numbers. Number one, they're important because you have less people that are on opioids, and it's saving the federal government, of course, as a side thing, a lot of money on prescription pharmaceuticals. But that means that you also have people that are not developing secondary and tertiary health problems as a result of the pharmaceuticals that they're taking. If you look at how many drugs the average pain patient takes, and you start looking through them, there's so many drugs they end up having to take to deal with the side effects of the drug that they're using against the pain. Well, if you would just start out with the cannabis, you wouldn't have to worry about all these side effects. So it would save a whole cascade down of secondary issues with the economy, with people's health, and the breakdown, and get people back to work. So let's take a look at which cannabinoid to choose, because this is the question that people ask me all the time, is how do I know what to use? Is it CBD? Is it THC? What is it that I'm supposed to be using here? And what I tell them is, okay, is like, first of all, you almost can't go wrong. No matter what you use, you're going to be helping yourself. There are ways of doing it that are better than others, but let's take a look. If you use the CBGA, which is what we call the mother compound, that is what is in a young cannabis plant. That is the cannabinoid when it's in its raw state, before it starts, based upon the genetic makeup of the plant, starting to convert over to either THCA or CBDA, THCVA, etc., etc. So the CBGA has analgesic and anti-inflammatory effects. So even if you walk up to a cannabis plant, take off a bud and eat it, you are going to be having benefits from that. It's not a very efficient way to do it because the dosing and it doesn't taste that great. A lot of people juice it. They do all sorts of things to get benefit from it at that point. The THCA, and the top row is all the raw. That's the unheated. The THCA also has incredible anti-inflammatory and anti-spasmodic. So anyone that's ever gotten up out of a chair and gone, oh God, my back, that sensation, it'll help with that, make that go away. THCVA with the Viron, also anti-inflammatory. CBDA, anti-inflammatory. CBDVA, anti-inflammatory. Then it starts getting a little bit more interesting when you heat the plant and you actually remove the acid molecule by decarboxylation, and that means that you're heating it up to a certain point. That's why people eat raw and they don't get high, they don't have the psychoactivity necessarily, but when you smoke a joint or you take a medicine that has been decarboxylated and activated into THC, you're going to have the psychoactivity. The THC fits like a key into a lock that actually fits the CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors, whereas when it has the acid molecule on it, doesn't fit. So it would be like trying to fit in a key that won't fit into a lock. So it works through other systems in the body other than the actual, the receptors themselves. So you've got the CBG, which is when you take the raw before it has a chance to develop into a full grown of whatever the genetics are on the plant. And that also can help as an analgesic. It'll definitely help with some pain reduction. It also is a bone stimulant. So if you have as part of your problem that your discs are disintegrating and you're getting shorter and shorter and you have some of these problems, it's very good to have some CBG to help you with any kind of bone loss that you experience with age. And with the exposure to toxins and exposure to bad diet and other sorts of negative stuff out there. Okay, so then the THC, anti-inflammatory, analgesic, anti-spasmodic, neuroprotective, you can't go wrong. I mean, it's pretty well going to give you everything you need, and if you happen to be fighting nerve pain as the result of a cancer diagnosis, you're going to go ahead and get a bonus there by helping to maybe kill some cancer cells while you're alleviating your pain. That's for another class. So the THCV, now the thing about THCV is it's more of a bone stimulant than it is an analgesic per se or an anti-inflammatory. But what it does is it also will activate the CB1 receptors, but it will not give you quite the same level of euphoria, which in some cases can be very good, but in other cases it doesn't have quite as strong in this. I mean, THCV is, it's your go-to if you're talking about diabetes, you're talking about weight loss, you're talking about a number of other conditions. And this one I think you'd be better off maybe sticking with the THC. And then let's take a look at the CBD. CBD is not only anti-inflammatory, analgesic, bone stimulant, anti-spasmodic, anti-anxiety. It's neuroprotective, and it doesn't have any psychoactivity per se. Now, there's 3 types of patients that we've had over the years using CBD. Either they get really, really sleepy from it, or they feel really awake and activated, or they don't feel anything at all. And frankly, until you've tried it, we won't know which one you are, because there is no way to predict how your individual endocannabinoid system is going to interact with the cannabinoid of CBD. And then CBDV, it's much, much rarer, so I'm not even going to spend any time on it, and it really doesn't have a lot of use in this, except for it does, of course, the bone stimulant. Now, once THC is aged, if you go into a dispensary or you have an access to see the lab results on medicine, back in the years ago, all they showed when you looked at a medicine is it would show the THC level, the CBD level, and the CBN. And the CBN, the reason they only showed the CBN because that was a way of knowing that the cannabis was old. Well, we've learned so much more now. Now we know that CBN is something to be encouraged because number one, it's fantastic for sleep. So if you have an opportunity to find a medicine that has a high level of CBN, you know that it's going to be much more somnolent and help you to sleep at night. It's also a fantastic anti-inflammatory. So you have here an analgesic, and then because it really works very similarly to the THC, except that it's aged and it's a slightly weaker connection to the CB1 and CB2 receptors. And then of course, aged THC becomes delta 8 THC, and that's an anti-anxiety. That's not going to really do as much for you in this situation. So if you came to me and said, okay, Mara, I'm in terrible pain, what do? I would put you on some CBD for inflammation. I would put you on some THC for all the inflammatory also, but the analgesic, the neuroprotective, because frankly, you need a break in your mind from some of the suffering that you're experiencing. But then I'd also want there to be a little bit of CBG in there because I think that has a really, really great benefit for a lot of things, and the antidepressant components of the CBG can be really helpful because anyone who's been in a lot of pain will tell you, as I said before, it is very depressing. So how much do you take? Here's the $64 million question. And that is like, who knows? We have to sit and find out because everybody's different. It's bespoke medicine. Every patient needs to be set up and titrated to whatever their particular level is, the same way we have to treating anything else, but we do have some pretty good guidelines at this point. We know that a 150-pound man might take 10 milligrams, might take 100 milligrams, because the weight of the man is not going to tell us what he's going to need. But if we can tell you that a starting point is start very, very low and increase very, very slowly. Also make sure that you pick very healthy products so that you're doing this with something that you're not going to be doing any harm to your body at the same time. So here's an example of a patient that we set up that was suffering from chronic pain, and this is where we had her at this point. She was taking 30 milligrams total of THC per day, and in the particular medicine that she was taking, there was also some alpha-pinene in there. There was beta-caryophyllene, limonene, linalool, and myrcene. Okay, this is like beyond the trifecta. This is the magic formula. If you start looking at the medicinal properties that are associated with each one of these terpenes, they each on their own could be used to affect pain. For example, beta-caryophyllene. Beta-caryophyllene activates the CB2 receptors, and if you recall from the previous slide, CB2 receptors are the ones that work on the inflammation because they're a part of the immune response. So that's fantastic for that. Limonene is uplifting. Anyone who's ever, walked in and hit a room fresher or had a fresh lime or lemon, they know that smell. It's very uplifting. It can transform you. Linalool, which is found in lavender. You go for a massage, they have lavender on the tables and on the pillows because it's got that fantastic ability to calm and soothe and relax you. Myrcene increases the bioavailability of the medicine that you take by breaking through the blood-brain barrier more easily. It's very somnolent also. It can be very calming. You also find myrcene in hops. And in mangoes in some cases. So anyway, this patient was taking the THC with that list of terpenes. The target dose was 30 milligrams, and it was taken in 2 doses, a 15 milligrams in the morning and a 15 milligrams in the evening. This was taken sublingually. You may note on there that it says take after a fat source, such as almond butter or avocado or anything that you like. The reason for this is this increases the bioavailability of the cannabinoids because it is fat soluble. So this is actually a much better way to take your medicine. In addition, we also have on some CBD, 20 milligrams per day, once a day, taken in the afternoon sublingually, a CBD product. This was able to have them take a very small down, the 15 milligrams of the THC in the morning, and then the CBD, they were able to be very highly productive during the day without being affected by too much psychoactivity until they got later on towards bedtime. And then the third thing is a topical. When you're dealing with nerve pain, when you're dealing with that deep, deep, deep nerve pain, a topical is not going to touch it. But in many, many cases, you have associated tense muscles because you tend to hold your body in a certain way when you're suffering and in pain, and you cause all sorts of other problems. And there's a lot of nerves that are at the surface area. And if you use a topical in those situations, then you're going to have focused relief without any of the psychoactivity. I personally use my topical. I'm fortunate enough that I have a pretty good supply. I use it regularly. I have one on my nightstand, I have one on my desk, and I have one in my purse most of the times, because I'll use it and I'll put it on my arthritis on my hands, put it on my neck, put it on my lower back, really anywhere that I'm suffering. And the nice thing about a topical, I have it on here where she was to use 10 milligrams 3 times a day. And basically, it's not really measured quite in that way, but it's an approximation. You can use it as much as you want and you'll still be okay. There is not too much. There have been cases, especially that we see with some of our older patients, where they think, oh gosh, I put it on this morning and it really helped, but I'm not supposed to use it again, because we say just use a topical and we don't tell them how many times to use it. So now I am always very clear with people to say, if you need it, apply it. You're not going to cause any kind of harm. No psychoactivity is going to come from it. You can't overdose on it. You can't hurt it. If anything, you're just going to keep the inflammation down and keep some of the pain at bay. And that's it. That's it. I hope that you've learned something here today, and thank you for having me.